everybody. Welcome back to Skirts and Words. I remember who we are. I'm Denise Kawaii, author of Woman with a Thousand Hats. This is Jen. She owns the vault where we are recording. And this is our friend, Sara Light-Waller. I read her name on Instagram all the time, but I never say it out loud. And she's here to talk to us today. We're going to talk about sci-fi of the ages.
From the beginning to now.
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about today. And she has a book, too, because she's an author. We met at NanoCon, which is a sci-fi convention in Longview, Washington. It's big business, you guys. There were like, I don't know.
Were there tens of people?
There were tens of people. I spoke with a couple of people a lot.
And Greg Bear was there, and
Greg
his
Bear
wife.
was there.
And they
What?
were lovely.
I know
Yeah.
that name.
Yeah, he was awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can be part of the conversation now because I shelve his books all the time.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
He was great.
Yeah, he was there, and his wife,
Astrid.
yeah, she stopped and chatted.
That's a really good sci-fi name.
Astrid. And
Yeah.
and her father was a big deal in the old folk days. And Greg Bear knew he was, when he was starting, a lot of the old folks from the Golden Age days were ending. So he met a bunch of them at the end. there.
Oh, that's a nice way to say it. They were ending.
They were ending. He was starting. It was all good. The 60s overlapped.
Okay. So what do you feel like was the golden age of science fiction?
Well, I didn't make it up. They talk about that.
Yeah.
It's about from the 20s-ish, certainly the 30s, to about the mid-50s. I usually rate it to about 57.
Mm-hmm.
57, when Sputnik went up, everything seemed to change.
Mm-hmm.
And then NASA started in 58.
So the reality kind of got rid of the fairy tale, or what do you think changed?
Well, in the early 50s, a magazine called Galaxy came out, and it was a big deal, and it lasted years, and it was reactionary to the old pulp stories.
Mhm.
And it said the first letter to the first editor's note in the first issue said, "We are not going to tell those stupid stories. We're going to tell serious stories that have deep gravitas, and they're the best." And they did put out a lot of good stories. So that was the early 50s. So you get this transition in the 50s.
I feel like reality has ruined a lot of things.
Yes.
Especially for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Darn it.
what happened to the Jetsons? I mean,
I know. Darn it.
yeah. So no jetpacks. We don't have anti-gravity working for us.
Yeah.
Not
Darn it.
yet.
Not yet.
I'm still waiting for my hovercar.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then do you feel like there was a decline in sci-fi and then a resurgence, or do you feel like it just changed to fit the time? Or what do you think is happening now? Do you think that we're coming back into a different kind of age of sci-fi?
It was interesting. This golden age time was very influenced by the 30s and 40s, certainly, by the Depression. And so what happened was there were tons of science fiction magazines, and there were so many that they needed a lot of writers, but they weren't paying anything. So these writers were like making half a cent a word and had to write lots and lots and lots and lots, crazy amounts. And
Like
so,
L. Ron Hubbard?
yeah, like him.
Amounts?
Yes,
Upwards?
of course. Then he started a religion, so that was good. Anyway, we'll go there.
That's another entire episode.
Another episode. But people really needed escapism, and badly, and that's why they would, work these long days, and then they would get these magazines, and they really enjoy them. And then the 50s was just a really different gig for everybody. It was much post-war was just really settled, and people began to. Science fiction started to get more intellectual, and the 60s, it was just weird. 60s science fiction is like the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. Creepy.
I wonder if that was influenced any by drug
Drugs?
culture. Okay. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
LSD.
Yeah. Okay, we're on the same wavelength.
Yeah,
I think
you
we're
gotta,
picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And so then, and the 70s were a little weird too.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get a lot more stable in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think that fantasy kind of went on a real big upswing in the late 70s and 80s. And then now, technology, I mean, you know, in the 60s you still had Star Trek, and you had all these, and then we had Star Wars in the late 70s, and they, but nobody realizes that Star Wars is basically a pulp story, again, like Indiana Jones was, too.
Yeah. If it was a space western.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, or an adventure story like Indiana Jones, like Doc Savage. And then, but then our technology started to catch up with us, and the CGI and all, and then we got, you know, now they can make anything look good
Yeah.
in a movie. So, you know, Avatar was just so groundbreaking. And now 3D, and now they're trying to make 3D movies without glasses that'll, you know, all this stuff. So, and now we have such technology that you could do movies like The Martian, which isn't even speculative. It's like, well, we have this tech, so it's not really fiction-y.
Right.
in a way.
That one was, I never know where to shelf that particular book. I adored that book. I went into it thinking, I don't know, you know, I'll read it, whatever. But I have it in sci-fi and I have it in general fiction too, because I don't really know if
Right.
it's not far-fetched.
Right, exactly.
So I don't know where to shelve it.
Well, and that's why I love it. Like, I'm a terrible science fiction author because I have my Adeline series, which is all robots. The humans are like raised by robots, is the whole thing. I like robotics. I like fact stuff, and so I loved The Martian because everything that was in it, like, I could see, and it wasn't far out there. I don't know why I have like no imagination. I think that's my problem.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all.
Well, and you know, there was a very famous science fiction character in the old days who was raised by robots. Did you know that? He's like super famous, Captain Future.
Oh yeah.
And he and I just saw concept art. They're going to make, the Germans are going to make maybe a live action movie about it
That'd be awesome.
with the robots.
That'd be awesome.
So, but no, it's a cool deal.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah. So, you know, I really like the fact based on that. But I am like, my husband almost broke up with me when we were dating because I don't like Star Wars, and like everyone I knew was into Star. So I know about Star Trek. I know details about it, and I can have a conversation. But it's just, I don't know.
I don't read too much modern stuff anymore past the point in science fiction because, well, for me, I get too influenced by the sound and the rhythm of it, and I can't write this and be reading modern because it just doesn't.
Oh, I see.
It gets into my
Right.
head, and I can't write it right.
What is it about the pulp that appeals to you?
Well, that's kind of interesting. I think that in a lot of ways our culture is so stressed. There's two things. Our culture is really stressed. People are stressed and they're not reading so much. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say to you, but I've had many people say to me they don't have time to read novels. And my goal for these books is to write short pieces, like they used to do in the magazines. So nothing really longer than a novella. I can write longer. I have.
Yeah.
But I want something where people can have a really good time and then get out, like read it over in the evening. But there's another piece to it, and that is that my big thing is that there's too much of a push to dystopia. Everyone kind of agrees about it, and I'm like, this is really bad for us as a species. I mean, all we're dreaming about is Mad Max, and we need to do better. And the one thing about the pulps that you could always say was that the humans, they were the heroes. They were always the good guys, and it was always kind of normal people. They had jobs. You know, some of them were like super whatever, but they weren't augmented, you know, or anything like that. And we need human heroes.
Yeah, I agree. What are the parameters of pulp? Like what makes something pulp? Is it the length or?
Well, there's the technical definition, and then there's my definition, which adds to it. Mine is the appendix.
Okay.
Corollary.
Corollary.
What made pulps were that the magazine were printed on pulp paper, which was so cheap. But that's all that they, you know, it made it possible to do it. So technically, that's what made them pulp. But really, at the time, they were just a certain kind of story, and they, one of the famous editors, Campbell, kind of put his stamp on the kind of stories that would be written, and he kind of decided that there'd these really heroic male figure, and that, you know, the kind of the framework of what it would look like. And people really liked it because it followed the morals of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have my own idea about what makes a pulpy story, and that is that you need a hero, whether it's a man or a woman, that you can relate to, like a real person.
Mm-hmm.
And they step up when there's danger, and they find maybe strength that they didn't know to have.
Mm-hmm.
And they get in weird situations, and that you could be this person, and even if they fall on their face a bunch of times, which they have to in a pulp story, in the end they show what it is to be like a good human being.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think we need that too.
Yeah.
So whether it's a man or woman.
Yeah.
Well, I think pulp, not just pulp, but I think that sci-fi is seeing a big revival.
Mhm.
Because for so long, like, we had sent people out into space, and that was kind of it. Like, we sent satellites up there and whatever. But now, there's a sports car that went up on a rocket.
Oh, I know.
Like,
Tesla.
but it's made it really cool again, and I think has made a whole new generation of people interested in exploring off planet.
I hope so.
I think that's happening. It's exciting.
It's really exciting. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things that I think was difficult, true or not, it's just difficult, is the fact that before a certain point, you just assumed that there was life on most of the planets, weird life on most of the
Mhm.
planets. And now NASA said, well, there can't be because of these reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But now they're saying there are exoplanets and other solar systems that might have life, so it gets the excitement back in again. But, you know, part of that too is like, who are we going to meet out
Right,
there?
right.
And, you know, are they going to be like us, and
Mm-hmm.
or not, or what's that going to do to us? And is that going to bring us together as a whole, you know, mankind thing?
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because so my son is in second grade, and we did the second grade space workbook thing. And one of the questions for the grade schoolers was, would you like to, like, people who are maybe going to Mars, would you like to be on a Mars colony? My son does not want to go. They don't have trains there, so that's out.
Deal breaker.
But
Not yet.
But I think it's interesting that it's a part of the dialogue again.
Uh-huh.
Like, hey, if we build a special kid camp on another planet, would you go?
Right. What did
And-
he say?
So my son's not interested.
'Cause no
but-
trains.
No trains, but he's asked a couple of other kids, and some of them are like, yeah, I'd go to Mars. It's
Yeah.
boring here on Earth. There's so many rules.
Well, what about the moon? The moon was really exciting for a while.
Well, and so
It's super
I
cool.
think so.
my son was not interested in the moon until we did a whole series learning about volcanoes, and he learned there were volcanoes on the moon, and now the moon is super cool.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's just getting people to think beyond whatever they think they know about things that were discovered decades ago.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the space station, the International Space Station, is cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's up there. It's been up there a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us about yours.
Okay, my book is, it's illustrated because I'm an illustrator and a writer.
Yeah.
And it's illustrated, it has a funny, shall I tell the funny story of how it started?
Sure.
So I'm kind of I'm filming, okay, this is on film, so I have to be careful what I say, but I'm kind of a design hack. I don't know if that works.
Okay.
But I love practicing design because it's just neat. And so I was doing a couple of pieces for a class I was teaching, and in grad school my minor was scientific illustration, so that was and in the 80s my instructor was like really old, so he taught us really old techniques, which was cool. And I was going to show one of them to my class, which isn't used very much anymore. So I'd done these 3 sample pieces, and I looked at them, and I said, you know, there's a story behind these 3. and I put them up on my easel to look at overnight, and I realized that there was kind of a story. So I laid out the first page as if for Thrilling Wonder Stories for a novelette, pretty much. And with the illustration, one of the illustrations, and then I started this book, Landscape of Darkness, and with Sam Mercury of the Space Patrol, and I had no text. So I just made up a couple of paragraphs of text, and I showed it to a friend who does not read science fiction, and he looked at it and he started reading, and he said, "Where's the rest of it?" And I said, "There isn't any more. It was never meant to be a book." He said, "Write it.
Aw.
You have to write it." So I did. And then I did illustrations in here that are of the style, not all of them hit it quite right, but of the style that they would have done in the magazines in black and white. The cover I did differently because I knew that if I did a pulp cover and I did it wrong by a little bit, people would have, it wouldn't have looked good. I had to hit it on the mark, and I wasn't sure I could. The other thing about it is that it would have limited my audience to just pulp fans, and I didn't want to do that either. So I went with something a little bit different, and it's, the original piece is about this big,
Oh.
and I cut it in front and back, in different pieces. So yeah, and people have really liked it. I had readers from like 10 to 80.
That's awesome.
Some of the older readers, they say it reminds them of what they were reading, and some of them started comparing it to Captain Future, Edmund Hamilton's series, and I thought, how is that possible? But I have a weird thing with Edmund Hamilton, and that is, I hadn't read him barely at all when I wrote this book, and then reading him more, I'm finding passages that I have already written in other places that are very similar. So I don't know if we have like a weird psychic connection through
Maybe.
time.
Yeah.
But people have liked it and they want a sequel, so I'm going to do a sequel in the fall.
Fantastic. So do you feel like it's accessible to any age, any gender?
I
Do
think-
people feel like it's relatable and accessible?
Yeah, it's, so they've told me. I've had readers of, the main character's a man, but it talks about the problems of organic versus inorganic people, and what that what kind of problems that might create. And the idea is that 200 years before this book takes place, there's something called the Threshold War, which is pretty much, it's about where we are in time. And it's, people start getting more and more, very small at first, inorganic implants. It's harder and harder to keep up, so you want to have a more inorganic processing, faster processing time and things. And humanity splits into two camps because some realize that the inorganic people they're kind of psychopathic. They don't have emotions anymore, and so there's this massive war. And the war is symbolic of the big blow up in the pulp stories of the 50s. And it's kind of a game changer for humanity. And the organic part of humanity wins, but it's terrible, terrible war. It isn't easy. But they move on from there, and they develop other kinds of technology. And in this story, there's a shipment of something called Heli Blue, which is, they're nanobots. They don't know where it's been smuggled from, but it's infecting people and turning them into cyborgs. So my hero has to go and find out and stop this.
Interesting.
But he's infected too. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's one of, that one sounds accessible to everyone. I think, even your cover is like it draws my eye, which I like. I think a lot of that, when I was choosing which books I wanted to read in middle school and high school and stuff, I was turned off by science fiction because of the covers. It just seemed like damsels in distress and like, I don't know. The whole genre to me felt like exploitive, or I don't know.
Well, it was meant to be salacious.
Yeah.
And then you have the next phase of it, which is just pure, like space stations or ships in space, and there's no people. It's just kind of cold. And then you get the weird things in the 70s, which is sort of strange, kind of trippy stuff. And now it's interesting because you see a lot of photographic stuff, so we're seeing more, real looking people on the covers,
Right.
in spacesuits and stuff.
I asked my husband how he would know if I was a cyborg, like how he would know which was the cyborg and which was me. And apparently, it would be very easy.
Really? What did he say?
Because let's see, I'm trying to think. I have a weird phobia about like my belly button. Like you can't touch it, or I will kill you. And he's like, all I'd have to do is just touch it right there. And if the cyborg was like, what are you doing? He'd be like, gotcha. And if I tried to karate chop him, he would immediately know it was me.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess pretty easy.
And you?
What do you think?
Denise, what do you think?
How would you know? How would your husband know that you were you and not a cyborg?
The cyborg probably wouldn't have enough ideas. Wouldn't be like, hey, let's start a new business. Hey, I'm going to write a new book. Hey, let's do this. Let's do that. It would probably be really focused. I'm not.
Yeah.
I am not. So it might take, 45 minutes or so for him to sort that out.
Yeah. How about you?
Well, it's in here how I feel about cyborgs. So if I started to come out in favor of them, then everybody can know that it's me.
Yeah.
I made it really easy.
Maybe we shouldn't be spilling these secrets on this.
I know, right?
Yeah, with all this audience.
Yeah.
No.
Well, no, I mean, I have a whole website which is talking about organic versus inorganic life. So if I just start saying how great it is and how excited I am to get my head implanted with stuff, run.
Oh, okay. Good to
That
know.
won't be me. They'll have gotten to me.
Yeah. Good to know.
Yeah, it's really funny how much of like the nanotechnology is ingrained in our daily lives that we have no idea. I started reading about nanotechnology when I was writing Adeline several years ago because I was playing around with the humans. They're being repaired by robots, and so the easiest way to do that is through nanotechnology. And I ended up not writing hardly anything about that, but I went down this rabbit hole of research. And my mom bought pants that don't wrinkle and are water repellent. And there's nanotechnology it's in the fabric, and that is what does the repelling. And I freaked out on her. I'm like, why are you wearing those pants? They're not even real pants.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying, and this war starts like that.
Right.
Just having Apple Watches, and not that I'm speaking it against, but these things are all, they build up very, very slowly, and then it's okay.
I think doesn't spray sunscreen have nanotechnology?
Yeah.
Okay until someone puts out an eye.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. Until someone
Right.
turns into a cyborg.
Right? Someone puts in an artificial eye that's like cybernetic. So yeah.
Well, and it's really interesting that we've reached a point where this type of technology is a part of our lives, and hardly anybody even thinks about it. They don't even know to ask.
Right. Exactly.
And it's kind of crazy.
There's a story I'm putting out, not the next one, but the one after, which is kind of addresses this. It takes place during the Threshold War, and it's a little interesting because it's got a female anti-hero. I wanted to experiment with that and see what that felt like because I'd never seen one before. It feels wrong. It just feels really wrong. But she addresses this head on, and the reason she's an anti-hero is because she really messes a lot of people up in the name of a good thing. She's. I shouldn't give any more than that away, but.
What's interesting about that type of idea to me is, in literature, women are typically the nurturing,
Yeah.
caretaking characters. But in real life, we all want to be the anti-hero and slap
Right.
some faces.
She slaps down the whole human race is
Yeah.
what she does because she realizes that she's pretty tough, and in the pulps, male anti-heroes were not uncommon. But like I said, it just felt weird, and I thought I'm never going to put this out. But then I told some people about it, and they're like, female anti-heroes, yeah, do it, and so we'll see. People may love her.
I think they will.
I
I already do, and I don't know anything about it.
She's very powerful. She's literally one of the most powerful people on the planet, and she's a woman, and she has done amazingly wonderful things for all of humanity. And then she kind of wises up and says, oh, this is maybe not the best thing that I have fostered. So,
Cool.
yeah.
When do you think that will come out?
Well, my next one's Anchor, and that's soon. Because the art is in process and so soon. And then sometime during the summer would be Incorruptible, is that one. And I've got the primary illustration I've sketched out, and I'm asking women's opinion because the initial sketch for the conceptual drawing, that's the first one, has a nude woman on it, and it suits the pulps to do that. And some of my friends said, free the nipple, and I'm like, yeah, well, okay, I'm just not sure. So I might have to dress her, but it's a pretty good design, so we'll see. Yeah,
All right.
that's just a me talking about me a lot. Okay, so now on to other people.
We like talking about you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, so you are talking to a lot of other women who are interested in your stories. So let's talk a little bit about women reading science fiction. It seems like there has been a shift. I know there are more science fiction authors that are women now.
There were quite a few in the old days too, actually.
But they wrote under men's names.
Not
No?
always.
Really?
There were some that were just super well known. Lee Brackett was one, and Catherine Lucille Moore was another one, and Judith Merrill, and Greg Bear said, yeah, she was a wild child. She was actually. She was very political, very interesting. But there were a lot of them.
Yeah.
It's just they were a little later mostly, but not much. They were good. Some of them were quite good. Some of them were not quite as good, but yeah. But now we've got plenty of women sci-fi authors, and that's marvelous.
Yeah, and it's interesting beyond literature. It's interesting to see the drive to bring more women into math and science jobs, which I think is starting them thinking about reading fiction about math and science, which is fantastic.
And then going into space.
Yeah.
I mean, why not? You know,
Right.
they should be captaining spaceships, and we have them. I mean, it sounds like I'm making fun, but I'm not.
No, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think there's some crossover too from the women now who started out maybe with Twilight, and then they got into paranormal, and then they got into sci-fi. Because I've noticed that in the store, when they come in, they're like, well, I like this author, and I'm like, well, try and move them over to some of the sci-fi, and they end up really liking those. So it's kind of been a good marriage from fantasy to paranormal to sci-fi.
Yeah, I can see that, actually. Who do you like in sci-fi?
Oh, geez. I haven't read a lot, but my all-time favorite is still, I don't know if is Douglas Adams sci-fi? Like, does he count as sci-fi?
I would say.
Because Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is like one of my all-time
It's
favorite
wonderful.
books. Oh, I love it.
It's
I
wonderful.
absolutely adore that book. So if there's an element of dry British humor to sci-fi, I will usually like it. I enjoyed The Martian. One of my favorite books ever, and I never thought about it as science fiction for whatever reason, was A Wrinkle in Time.
Oh, yeah.
I came across it in 6th grade. I was bored at a babysitter's house, and I started reading the first few pages because it's normally nothing I would have picked up if I knew that there was even a hint of sci-fi, because I would have been like, oh, no, that's for boys. Like, that's not for me. But I got into that book, and I remember reading, like, long after dark. I could barely see, and it was the first time that I saw a female lead in a book that was smart, and it was okay, and it wasn't a thing. Like, everybody wasn't fawning and talking about, like, she's smart. Like, she just was, and it was fine. And she wasn't beautiful, and she wasn't funny, and, you know, she didn't fall into Prince Charming's lap or whatever. I really liked that, and I remember I ended up reading it probably 6 times between 6th grade and high school, and just being like, yeah, this is who I want to be. And then it finally clicked after high school, like, that was sci-fi. You read that, and you really liked it. And I was like, shh. But
And
no.
that's a tough book.
Oh, I love it. And
I mean, it's
both my boys have read it, and I wanted to make sure, you know, that they read it, and they had seen females that are strong and, you know, can do whatever. So I always make sure that anything that I would recommend to a girl, I make sure that my boys have read too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that's an excellent book.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
really, really good.
And I love the whole quintet. It just gets a little bit funky after a while.
I liked A Swiftly Tilting Planet.
I
a
liked
lot.
that one, but then Many Waters kind of, I don't know, it got
I'm
weird.
sure I
It
ever
lost me.
read that one.
It lost me.
Oh my God. I think I missed that one. That's terrible.
Yeah, I have it.
There's still time.
Yeah,
I
I
know,
have it
right?
here at the store. Should
Okay,
you like to purchase
excellent.
it? Actually, it's my son's copy.
Oh, that's not fair.
Well, I made him sell it. He's done with it.
Oh, okay.
His mom owns a bookstore. He's got access to all the books.
Now, can we ever put magical realism? I mean, it's not sci-fi, and it's certainly not fantasy. But sometimes when I'm reading magical realism, like Tom Robbins, I think, because there's it's virtually sci-fi, like Jitterbug Perfume.
Oh, I
mean,
never
it's-
thought about that. Christopher Moore too.
Yeah, I love him.
Oh, me too.
And he's funny.
That's so, oh my gosh.
I mean, it kind of
Look
is.
at me.
Right? I mean, it's like, you've read Jitterbug Perfume.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't even think about it as.
Immortals, kind of. I
Yeah.
mean, it's essentially time travel. It's kind of
Yeah.
a long way around.
Because I
to
read
quote Doctor Who.
with Christopher Moore. I read Practical Demon Keeping.
Oh yeah,
I love that
yeah.
one.
I've
Okay.
read everything of his.
Sweet. Lamb
Yeah.
is my favorite. My all-time
Lamb
favorite.
is my
Oh my
favorite.
gosh. I make that suggestion to anybody that likes. I'm like, hey, are you snarky or sarcastic? You should read this book. It's the book for you.
And what was it? The Island of the Sequin Love Nuns. That's one of his.
Yeah.
And then, but I actually like his ones about. I like his vampire ones, and I like the death ones.
Yeah.
Because but the vampire ones are really good.
He has a new one out called Noir that I want to read just because I like the cover.
The last one I read was Sacre Bleu,
I haven't read that one.
which it's all about the color of blue, and it's kind of artsy. So it was cool. I liked it.
Well,
That's
that time flew by. I think we have reached our time.
Wow, that was so much fun.
Right? Wasn't it fun?
Thank you so much for having me
Thank you.
tonight.
Yes,
So
thanks for
check
coming.
out Sarah's book, and we'll talk about see if we can carry that here because we have a whole local author section.
Excellent.
Yeah, so making
Wonderful.
connections. Well, thank you for joining us, and make sure you catch us next time. We're going to have another illuminating guest, and
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
So my website is lucinapress.com.
Okay. Do you want to spell that out?
Lucina
Okay.
press.com.
All right. Check it out.
So
Perfect. Well, thank you again for coming,
Yeah,
and
thank you for having
it's been a
me.
great time, and we'll catch you next time.
Do, 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 do.